Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, cha, bonjour, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hey, my name is Jed Lee. Welcome to Reading with Your Kids. We're coming to you from the beautiful, sunny neighborhood of Reedville, located in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so very honored and absolutely delighted that you are joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. We do that by sharing fun, thoughtful, and thought-provoking conversations with fascinating people who just happen to be writing books for kids of all ages. You can join us in our mission by telling all of your family and friends about the show and letting them know that they can hear us on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network. And they can find us on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Good Pods, Podcast Addict, Amazon Music, Audible, CastBox, Player FM, wherever you find your favorite shows. We have a really wonderful show for you today. Up first, Angie Kang is here to celebrate her absolutely gorgeous picture book. It's called Our Lake. I really enjoyed getting to know Angie. I think you are going to love to meet her too. We also are going to take a listen back since the baseball season is underway. Listen back to our conversation with Mark Angelo and celebrating his book, Can We Play Baseball, Mr. DeVille? Hey, parents, grandparents, caregivers, and teachers, are you looking for a fun way to teach important values to your kids? Check out Timothy'sLessons.com.
It's Timothy's Lessons. Timothy's Lessons in good values. It's Timothy's Lessons. Timothy's Lessons in good values. Teaching life lessons to his friends. It's Timothy's Lessons. Forward thinking activities. It's Timothy's Lessons. Building confidence and mental strength. It's Timothy's Lessons. Timothy's Lessons in good values. It's Timothy's Lessons. Timothy's Lessons in good values. Wonderful fun sing-along songs. It's Timothy's Lessons. Important lessons on key values. It's Timothy's Lessons. Children's books and uplifting stories. It's Timothy's Lessons. Timothy's Lessons in good values. It's Timothy's Lessons. Timothy's Lessons in good values.
Check it out today, Timothy'sLessons.com. Hey, my friends, here's something to think about. What if mistakes weren't something to fear, but something to celebrate? In It's Okay Not to Know by Brenda Doe, young readers meet Bink, a lovable little monster who worries they're not good enough when they struggle or make mistakes. But then, Bink discovers a powerful truth. Every uh-oh is an opportunity. Every question is a chance to grow. And every child deserves to know perfection isn't what makes you special. Curiosity, courage, and self-love do. A must-read for parents, teachers, and anyone who wants to help kids build resilience and confidence. Get your copy of It's Okay Not to Know by Brenda Doe today, because learning begins when we stop fearing the unknown. I am so looking forward to this interview. I just met our guest, and she is delightful, and I think we're going to have a really great time. She is the author and illustrator of the debut picture book. It's called Our Lake. Please welcome to the show, Angie Kang. Hey, Angie, how are you?
Hi, Jed. I'm good. How are you?
I'm delighted. I'm really excited to speak to you. Folks, you're listening. You can hear the delight in Angie's voice, but she has such a wonderful smile that it's just a pleasure to meet her and to talk about this book that I'm reading is covering some pretty heavy topics.
Yeah, it is. It's a pretty somber, kind of quiet story. So I'm really excited to be talking about it with you because I feel like you're able to give it the gravity that I hope that it feels when kids read it too.
So let's get into it. Our Lake, the illustrations are beautiful, by the way. I just received my copy just a couple of days ago. As I look at it, as I look at the artwork, I'm feeling like some of these spreads are spreads that I could imagine seeing in the Boston Museum of Fine Art.
Thank you.
But it's just that style. It's certainly kid friendly, but it's not cartoony. There's nothing wrong with cartoony. This seems very appropriate for the subject matter of Our Lake.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense because I started out thinking that I wanted to do fine arts and thinking that I wanted to just make capital P paintings, but kind of fell into Kidlit because I just liked it so much. I would always go to the library and spend a day in the kids section just pulling out books and reading them. And then in the end, it kind of didn't make sense to keep pulling myself away from something that I kept kept gravitating toward. But I appreciate that. It's nice to hear that there's still like roots of something that I wanted to do before in the work that I do now.
Yeah. Well, it's always smart when something bigger than yourself is leading you in a certain direction. It's great to pay attention to it.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of funny because I started out by, of course, wanting to do painting, but I also was studying writing as a dual degree at Brown and RISD at the same time. And whenever anyone heard those two degrees, they were always like, oh, well, then you must want to do books and just write and illustrate them yourself. And I think at first I pushed against it just because it was so obvious. But sometimes the most obvious path is the right one. And it's been such a joy to be doing it, and I feel so lucky to have the opportunity now.
Yeah. So let's talk about Our Lake. We're going to meet a couple of brothers in this story, correct?
Yes, two brothers.
Yeah.
One older, one younger, and they're going to a place very special to them, one they used to go to with their father. It's a story that I feel like tries to gesture at a larger experience of all these times they've been there before, but without explicitly talking about them. And this person who, while is not here in the current book, in the current present, is there in all of these memories and all of these experiences they've been at before, which is their father.
Yeah. And from what I'm reading, the dad has passed away.
Yes.
And so certainly, we understand the grief of that. But I think there are a lot of kids who are experiencing similar grief, not through death, but because of divorce or because of circumstances beyond anybody's control, travel for work or whatever. There are a lot of kids feeling that grief and feeling that kind of hole inside their selves.
Yeah, I agree. I think that though this is a very extreme version of missing, there is also all these other smaller ways of kind of feeling that loss. Like you said, even short-term, long-term. And I think that it's a reminder that there are all these ways that we can take care of each other in these large and small ways, and maybe hold on to these like beautiful memories that are able to kind of buoy us during these harder, maybe just darker days, So
what inspired you? Because you came on, we first started talking, it's such a bright personality, and, you seem like a very, very happy person. This kind of a heavy subject for a debut book. What was it that inspired this book?
Yeah, I actually started writing this book as a poem exercise, which I think is kind of funny. I was looking at this painting by Milton Avery called The Quarry Bathers, and there are these three figures in the painting where one is kind of diving into this quarry, and I was writing a poem kind of as an exercise, ekphrastic, inspired by it. But it was interesting because at the time of writing this poem, which I didn't realize this kind of during the process itself, but only looking back, one of my friends had lost someone very close to them, and it was a tough time for all of us. I think that we as her community wanted to support her and wanted to be there. And though it wasn't someone necessarily in my life, it was definitely this kind of secondhand grief that was permeating through just like us trying to be there for each other, which I think is, an incredible way to be in community and be there for other people. But as I wrote this poem, I had taken one of the characters out of of like the three characters in the painting, and that third character became just like a reflection in the water. And so when I ended up finishing this kind of short little draft, not planning to do anything with it, I showed it to my husband, and he was like, I think that you could make this into a children's book. And that was kind of all I needed to kind of launch forward and say, okay, I'll try drawing some sketches and see what goes from here. But it was really nice. It was really funny too, because I had been trying to write so many children's book manuscripts at the time. I've been wanting to for years and years, but none of them felt quite right. And I think it took my kind of getting out of that headspace and not turning on this part of my brain where, you think, oh, I'm writing for children, I have to write in a certain register, for me to unlock something that kids might, hopefully still like.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm listening right now to a book called Big Magic, written by Elizabeth Gilbert. And in it, she is talking about ideas and creativity as not necessarily coming from us, but that ideas are kind of floating around out there, and we're kind of like an antenna that, it kind of comes to us. And like a story or a painting or something creative is looking for somebody to bring it to life. And almost kind of sounds like what happened with our lake.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way of looking at it. I would feel so honored for something to be channeled through that. I think that there's something there about responding to these energies and being able to funnel them into different creative practices, which might end up in something like a book.
Yeah. Neat. What was it like when you get the call from, I'm assuming from your agent, that said, we got it, they bought the book?
Oh my gosh, that was such a whirlwind. It was actually an auction process, so is like a whirlwind of a whole day where I was getting these emails from my agent, and she's saying this person likes it and this person likes it, and it was really just encouraging to know that a lot of people saw promise in something, which I felt really nervous bringing into the world and unsure about at the time, but it's so close to my heart, and I am really proud of now.
Yeah. If you don't mind, we've learned, in addition to celebrating books, we've learned, and listeners have learned a lot about the kid-lit industry. For example, I was blown away the first time I spoke to a publisher, and he told me it could take 3 or 4 years from the time I buy a manuscript to the time a book hits the shelves. And I'm like, I'm not old enough. I'm too old to start writing kids' books now. But this is the first time I'm hearing about an auction. Can you tell us a little bit, not with sharing details, but just a little bit about that process?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had sent the book on submission through my agent, and she sent it to a couple editors she thought might be interested. And after one editor signaled that she might be interested, then she sent emails to everybody saying that, oh, look, someone is interested. Maybe you want to take a closer look at the manuscript. And at that point, there are a couple other people who were like, oh, I think we would be interested as well. And so she decided on one day to be the kind of auction day. I mean, everything was all happening virtually, and I wasn't present for anything, but she handled it really, really thoroughly and precisely and so well. I'm so lucky to have her. And then they just kind of submitted some offers that I think they had to run through their own themes and everything. And at the end of the day, it was also about the highest bid, but also about the letters that they sent and like the kind words and the meetings that I had with them and who I felt like maybe best understood the book and best was able to bring it to life in the way that I envisioned.
Yeah. Well, I love that. And I love that you mentioned it wasn't only about the highest bidder. It was about who you felt you were going to be able to work with to make this the best it could be.
Yeah, yeah. I think that the vision for the book is such a big part of what the editor also has to offer and what I felt like I could align with. And when I met my editor in particular, Namrata, she was like electric. When I got on the call with her, I was like, oh my gosh, she is brilliant and so sharp. And my art director was my, art director now, but at the time, art director to be was on the same call, Jasmine, and the two of them were just so effusive and kind and everything that I wanted as a friend. But so it would be great to have as an editorial team as well.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I don't think people understand, and certainly I didn't, how much of a collaborative process creating a children's book is.
Yeah, yeah. I think that is definitely undersold because it feels like the author gets all the glory because their name is on the cover and it's really, there's so much thought and care and conversation that happens behind the scenes all the way up till publication. Yeah. I remember for some of the sketches, I had done them initially in pencil, so they were almost thumbnail, very simple. And then I wanted to do another set of sketches, which were done with color, so I could kind of explore all of those possibilities before I had to go straight to paint. And my editor said such wise words when it came to deciding the color between the past and the present, and really shaped the way that I approach them, which, is just entirely how the book looks now.
One of the things, I haven't mentioned it for a while, but one of the things we encourage families to do is to take a picture walk through a book. Before we sit down and read it, it can be really fun and can really stir a great conversation if you just maybe cover up the words and take a walk through the book and talk about the illustrations. And what do you think this story is going to be about? What do you think this picture is telling us?
Wow, I've never heard of that before, but I love that. I think I maybe unconsciously take picture walks when I go through bookstores and flip through books.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great way to, again, it's a great way just to start that conversation. And then when you do read the story, it's like, well, how close were we? And wow, and it's just another way to experience, because a book like Our Lake is one of those books that I think certain kids, even if they're not experiencing grief at the moment, I think it's one of those books. I could see my daughter really wanting to read this book over and over again. And it's just a different way to experience the book with your kids.
I really appreciate that. Yeah, I hope so.
So what kind of conversations do you think a family could have as they're reading or taking a picture walk through Our Lake?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think of course, the conversations about grief and healing that could happen. I think there are a lot of opportunities to kind of reflect on what are some happy memories that you have with someone you love or with me or with some of your friends, because it's able to bring forth it's kind of like that song in Sound of Music, My Favorite Things, where, when they're feeling bad, they think about their favorite things. It's kind of like, oh, if you're having a hard day, what are some nice memories or beautiful thoughts that you can bring to the surface and kind of rely on and think about as you move through that. And then there's also this little, it's kind of a secret, kind of not, this little red bird that I've hidden on some of the spreads. I have it on the end papers too. There's like a bird in one of the trees, and then in the last end paper spread, the bird is flying away. And though it's not on every single spread, it's like present on some of the earlier ones, and then on the one where little brother jumps off into the lake, because I wanted there to be this reminder of father there somewhere. he has this red hat that older brother wears throughout the story. And so I thought a nice red bird could evoke his memory and remind the boys that even though they don't know it, and even if it's not a literal accompaniment, he's still there in some sweet way. So that could be another fun thing to search for while reading the book.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, we celebrate that books can be mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. It obviously, if a kid is experiencing grief or whatever kind of feelings of loss, this would be a great book to kind of sit and help process that. But I think too, if your kid has somebody in their classroom or a friend who has lost someone, this would be a great way to kind of have a conversation and just talk about, well, how do you think your friend is feeling right now? How might you be able to help them?
Yeah, I really love that. I do because I think that the brothers are also, we follow the younger brother throughout the story and we see his process of grief, but there's also chances for the kid to be the older brother in this situation and encourage their friend or their sibling or someone they care about to come out and experience life again when things are hard. So I love that as a way for kids to feel that empathy and to think about how they could participate in the healing process.
Yeah. I'm curious, this has been, you shared with us that this has been a big experience, started with just, doing an exercise, looking at a painting and then it became a book and then it went to auction and here it is, it's out in the world. How did creating Our Lake change you?
Wow, that's a beautiful question. I think profoundly. I think that I feel like a different artist at the end of it, but also, I feel like a more thoughtful writer. And I also think that, this is a little funny, but I'm an only child, and I find that I've written a lot of this book is about these two brothers and the way that they're able to lean on each other as family. And I found that after making this book, I've been able to find my own surrogate family members through my friends and my community. Because I think sometimes as a kid, I was really lonely. So I think now I'm realizing that you don't have to have grown up with people who as family, you can also make that, which sounds kind of cliche, but maybe for a reason because it feels true.
Yeah, it really is true. I've had, I think the word is chosen family, and we've hosted international kids in our home, and each one of those kids have become part of our family, and we stay in touch, even though we're on opposite sides of the world. We stay in touch, and we just had one of our daughters came to visit us, flew halfway around the world to spend the holidays with us. So, chosen family, I think, is pretty important in our lives.
Yeah, I do think that sometimes when you're working on something, you really have to enter the world itself and kind of feel around what it's like. And so kind of spending time with these brothers over the course of painting painting the trees around them, it's been like I've had this little family that I'm able to now send off into the world, and now they can make their own families too.
Yeah. Was it difficult for you? Because one of the things I've learned is that so much of a picture book is told through the illustrations. Was it difficult for you to leave some of the words out so that your pictures could tell the story?
Yes, yeah. I think that was a big shift from my first poem excursion to turning it into a full picture book dummy, because of course when you don't have any images, you kind of get attached to these turns of phrase that can be very visual and very descriptive, but afterwards you kind of have to lift that and let, like you said, the art do kind of the heavy lifting, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
But it was cool because then there are these moments where the words are very sparse, and in this the book, there are pretty few words overall. And then you kind of get to experience like the lushness of the foliage and the lake just by itself. And, yeah, like you said, just let the art do the speaking.
Yeah. Well, what's next for you, Angie? Are you going to tackle another heavy subject, or you think you're going to write a kid's book that's a little bit more fun?
I do think I think about heavy things in my life all the time, so it may be another heavy subject.
Okay.
I am working on this script for this draft of a story that's kind of related to my grandmother.
Oh.
My extended family all live in China, and it's just me and my parents here in the US, but my grandmother came to visit a couple times when I was younger and had raised me in some capacities. And I think that I want to write a story about the ways in which we meet each other again after long times apart. So it may end up being a little bit sad, but also hopefully ultimately, loving and all of that.
That's wonderful. Angie, where can we go to find out more about our lake and find out more about you?
Yeah, I have a website, and it's just angiekang.net because I wasn't able to get the .com. And I'm also on Instagram at Angie Kang. It's Angie Kang, but the G's are Q's.
Okay.
So it looks like the G's, but
Awesome. Awesome. We had a really fun time speaking to the author and illustrator of Our Lake. It's a debut picture book from our guest, Angie Kang. Angie, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Jed. Thanks for having me.
Hey families, would you like to share a miracle with your kids? At the Wolf Conservation Center, hope was fading. The endangered Mexican wolves dreamed of a pup, but none had come. Until one tiny miracle changed everything. Meet Trumpet, a real-life wolf pup whose incredible birth brought joy, hope, and a lesson in conservation. Trumpet the Miracle Wolf, written by Leocadia George, is a heartwarming true story that will inspire your whole family. Teach your kids the power of hope, love, and protecting endangered species. Get your copy today and join the wild adventure. This episode of Reading with Your Kids is brought to you by We're Going to the Dinosaur Forest, written by Marie Nichols. Marie Nichols was recently on my Connecticut Book Festival's podcast, and what a delightful woman. One of the things she said really struck home with me. She said, parents nurture with care, siblings are taught to share, but grandparents embrace the dares. We're Going to the Dinosaur Forest is a colorful, fun-filled book where this grandmother dares to embark on a wild journey with her grandson into the dinosaur forest. It's available on Amazon. It's also available on bookshop.org. You and your kids and you and your grandkids are going to love this book. It's We're Going to the Dinosaur Forest, written by Marie Nichols. My friends, if you have ever thought about owning a business that's fun, rewarding, and makes a valuable contribution to kids' education, well, Brooklyn Robot Foundry is calling your name. I recently met Jenny Young. She's the founder of Brooklyn Robot Foundry. And let me tell you, she is incredible. Her passion for getting kids excited about STEAM, that's STEM plus art, it's contagious. I'm telling you. This isn't your average kids program. Brooklyn Robot Foundry is all about hands-on, screen-free STEAM fun. These kids get to build a different robot each class and take it home with them afterwards. Kids love it. Parents are raving about it. And now you can own a franchise and bring this incredible experience to families in your community. Now, this isn't your typical franchise. Brooklyn Robot Foundry is a mobile, flexible business with a deep curriculum that's making a real impact in schools and communities around the country. Franchise owners get a proven curriculum, full training, and support from a passionate team. So what are you waiting for? Please visit bit.ly/robotjed. That's bit.ly/robotjed. And let them know you heard about it on Reading with Your Kids. Join us right now from the beautiful city of Vancouver in British Columbia in the beautiful nation of Canada. Our guest is here today to celebrate a really great book. It's called Can We Play Baseball, Mr. DeVille? Please welcome to the show, Mark Angelo. Hey, Mark. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing fine, Jed. How are you?
I'm really wonderful. I love that you're coming to us from Vancouver. We've had so many guests join us from British Columbia. It sounds like it's a real hotbed of creativity.
It is. You know, there's a lot going on here, whether it be from a writing perspective, a film perspective. It's a great place to live. You know, I grew up in California, in Southern California, certainly enjoyed my time there, but I've been here in British Columbia now for a long time, and it's a place that I truly love.
It's surprising, I guess, that to hear that you went from SoCal, where another place we've had lots of authors from. Never having visited Vancouver myself, I just get this. Anything in Canada, I just imagine as being frozen for most of the year. But I understand Vancouver is a lot different than Saskatchewan and Saskatoon and Alberta.
Yes, it is a bit warmer here. You know, it's not quite as cold as places like Winnipeg or if you head all the way back to the east, but it's a beautiful city. You know, beautiful mountains, beautiful rivers, nice. You know, we're right on the ocean. It's a great place to be.
So, being from Southern California, it makes sense that you've written this book about baseball and about the Hollywood icon, Mr. DeMille.
Well, you know, certainly it's a story that my brother and I talked about a lot over the years. And I always thought it was a great story. I'll tell you a little bit more about it in a minute, but it's a story with multiple elements. I always enjoyed telling it. And a couple of years ago, my brother was ill, and I went down back to Los Angeles, and we spent a couple of days telling stories from our past. And this one in particular, we laughed about, and my brother suggested that I write it finally, you know. So that's what I set out to do, and the book is in fact dedicated to the memory of my brother, and certainly writing it brought back incredible memories, and it is a fun story.
Well, you know, as I'm looking at your website and looking at some of the art from the book, it certainly does bring back memories for this almost 100-year-old guy of, you know, baseball cards and playing what we would call sandlot baseball, which basically meant just playing baseball in whatever open space that we could find that we weren't going to be chased out of. And those are really, really fun memories. And it's something I don't think a lot, certainly not here in the East Coast, you don't see kids just going out and getting a pickup game of baseball together anymore. Lots of kids are playing baseball, and they're in all sorts of organized sports, and they're getting great instruction, and they're using great equipment and playing on beautiful fields. But that's a lot different than what you and I experienced as kids.
Yeah, you don't see it as much as you used to. And you mentioned Sandlot. You know, the movie The Sandlot was one of my favorite films of all time. But those were amazing years, and I do think this story is a timely one. It's got lots of different elements to it. It's fun. It's uplifting. There is an element of nostalgia to it. Even the illustrations, which I thought Patricia and Robin DeWitt did, have a wonderful feel to them, very much a nostalgic feel to them. But the book also speaks to community. It's got an environmental message to it as well that I'd love to talk about in a couple of minutes. But it's a true story, you know, from my own childhood, and one that my brother and I often talked about. And it tells the story of a young boy, his friends, and their love of a game. In this case, the great game of baseball. And it focuses on their search for a place to play ball, which ultimately led to this incredible encounter. But it's the kind of story I hope that many children will identify with, in that it does focus on a shy but determined young boy, but also for parents. My hope is it'll get them thinking back to their own childhood, those very special years, and hopefully it'll make them smile.
Yeah. And, one thing I just want to mention before I asked you to tell us a little bit more about the story and about all the different elements. One of the pictures features a group of kids. There's a kid sliding into base, which is basically just a jacket.
Exactly.
Which is so...
We didn't have real bases back then.
I remember the first time I played with a real base. I think I broke my ankle. But in addition to the base, that's basically just a piece of cloth. You have a girl playing, and that was something that my cousin Darlene was the best player on our makeup teams. And we've heard that girls weren't able to play in Little League and all this stuff, and that was true. But girls certainly were able to go out and play with us on the Sandlot because we just needed everybody we could to get enough people to play a game.
Oh, Jed, that's so true. We would pull together all the kids that we could, and, often we'd need a certain number so we could have, something close to a real game. And it was wonderful. There were boys and girls, there were kids, quite a wide range and age span, quite an age span. I was the youngest at the time. But there were kids that would come out and play with us that were 3-4 years older. But it was fun. It was this particular field became a neighborhood gathering spot, and it brought together kids from from all across the neighborhood, and that sense of community, the things you do at that age with your friends. That's a key message in the book as well.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about this story.
Well, the story goes back to 1958 when the Los Angeles Dodgers first arrived to L.A. They had come there from Brooklyn, and the city was literally going through Dodger mania. And myself and my brother and my friends, we were the most avid Dodger fans. I was the kind of kid that you talked about exchanging baseball cards. We all had baseball cards back then, trading cards all the time. I would listen to the game at night. Even as a boy, I'd go to bed early so I could turn the radio on and listen to the game as long as I could stay awake. Ben Scully, a very famous broadcaster, was the Dodger broadcaster back then. And I'd listen to him call the game every night, and my parents would tiptoe into my room about 9:30 or 10 and turn the radio off after I had fallen asleep. But, we loved baseball. We were always out, playing catch, trading baseball cards. The one thing we didn't have in our neighborhood was a place to play ball. We lived up in the hills, and there simply weren't there weren't any appropriate places to play ball. And the public parks that were around, they were a long way away, too far away for young kids to get to. So that led us to explore the possibility of playing in Mr. DeMille's yard. He had this massive yard at the time that, and it wasn't even fenced. He had a big, like a cedar hedge down at one end of it, and it had a little cave-like opening in it, and we could look at that field, and it was seldom used. We seldom saw people there. So we decided one afternoon to take a stab at it. So we crawled through the cave-like opening onto the field, and we played ball and had a wonderful time, and nobody told us to leave. So we came back the next day and then the next, and before you knew it, it became a neighborhood gathering spot until one day that summer, Mr. DeMille's gardener approached us and told us that too many of our balls had ended up in his prize rose garden, and he told us we had to leave, and we were crushed. So we all crawled back through the cave-like opening onto the street and thinking that our baseball games had come to an end. But I couldn't help but think there had to be something we could do. So I suggested that we go talk to the great Mr. DeMille. And I had never met him before. I had only seen him from afar as he drove through the neighborhood in his big, dark vehicle. But my friends and my brother were nervous about doing that, but finally everybody agreed. So we set off to Mr. DeMille's house, and I wanted to go talk to him. But as I started to walk up the stairs, my friends didn't want to go. They decided to stay behind and wait for me and hide along the street. So I knew at that point I was totally alone. So I had to go up to the front door and ring the doorbell, and I remember just being so nervous and wondering if I was really doing the right thing. But in turn, that's what led to this incredible encounter. And just to quickly say, when I got there and I finally got the nerve to ring the doorbell, and I had my trusty Dodger hat on and everything else, his butler answered the door. And I asked if I could talk to Mr. DeMille. I told him I was here to talk to him about baseball. And he told me Mr. DeMille is unavailable. And then I went on to say, how as kids, we want to play ball more than anything else, but there's no place to play. We love the Dodgers. We want to be ball players just like them. And I'd really like to talk to Mr. DeMille about baseball. We've been playing in his yard. We weren't supposed to do that. I'm sorry for that, but I'd love to talk to him about it. And the butler said, once again, I'm sorry, he's not available. And, sadly, I accepted that, and I turned to walk away. And then I heard this distant voice in the hallway behind the butler saying, show the young man in. And that, in turn, led to this encounter. But, it was quite something.
That is amazing, and we should point out that the Mr. DeMille that we're talking about was the Hollywood mogul, Mr. DeMille, right?
Mr. DeMille was an amazing man in terms of his accomplishments. Many consider him, he is actually the founding father of American cinema. He produced, going all the way back to 1914, the first full-length feature film shot in Hollywood. He's perhaps the most commercially successful producer-director of all time. All of us, especially those of our age, but most people, I think, have seen his films. The film 10 Commandments is still shown regularly. His movie, The Greatest Show on Earth, won the Best Picture Oscar in 1952. I think many people know him by his reputation. They know him for his work in a more formal way. But this book strives to put a more human face on him. And I have to say that one singular direct encounter I had with him was unforgettable in every sense of the word.
It's hard for me to imagine that moment. Here it is. You're like, this is the guy that everybody's like, they see in the limos, and his name is up on the big screen. And back then, people need to remember that back then, the big screen was kind of like it. We don't have all these 8,000 different screens that we can carry around in a pocket and see anything anytime we want. It's you went to the movies and you hoped you got there and saw it the week that it was in the movie theater before it moved on.
Jed, you're so right. And that's why they call it kind of the golden age of movies, because back then movies really were it. Television was in its infancy. Movies were still a big, big thing. And Mr. DeMille was, by most accounts, in the view of many people, most people, the greatest person in film. Certainly at that time, and many would argue he still is today.
I gotta ask, and I was in that position that you were in, of like, oh yeah, we have this great plan. Okay, so you knock on the door, and then you go up to whatever door it is, whether it's Mr. DeMille or the mean old lady who lives around the corner, and you go knock on the door, and you turn around, it's like, wait a minute, there was an army behind me. Where'd you guys go?
Jed, that's exactly how it was. So anyway, when he said, show the young man in, and I realized that I was going to have a chance to see Mr. DeMille, I really at that point wondered if I had done the right thing, and I remembered even to this day, my heart, I think it's the first time in my life that I could remember hearing my heart just beat 100 miles an hour. But anyway, so I followed the butler in and down this long hallway and into this waiting room, and there was Mr. DeMille, and then our conversation started.
That was amazing. So, are you able to tell us the outcome of the conversation, or do we have to wait to read the book?
Well, I'd like you to read the book, but
okay.
I can just say that it was an incredible encounter, and as young as I was, I still remember it so well. And I started off talking very, very nervously. And then, but yeah, I finally got all the words out, and I asked him the main question I had come to ask. But I'll never forget his response. And once again, I think this book puts a very human face on C.B. DeMille. And, you know, I have to say that he passed away just several months after I met him, you know, and I was quite sad to see that. But this was the only direct face-to-face encounter that I had with him in all the years that, in the years I was there.
Wow. I'm curious, what's the response been from his estate?
Well, I think most people that have seen the book, it's only now coming out, but I think they feel very good about it. I mean, it certainly puts, and I talk about Mr. DeMille in the end, and he was a man in the end that allowed children to be just that, children. He had in that one encounter, and that's all I can speak to, but I think his family, his estate looks at the book in a very positive way because, once again, I think it puts a very human face on this incredible gentleman.
Yeah. And I think, too, it's just, and you mentioned you were going to talk a little bit about the environmental message. For years, people have dreamed and hoped to have this beautiful lawn with the roses and the garden and just pristine. But now we're starting to realize that, those beautiful lawns that are acres and acres and no one ever steps foot on, those aren't the best thing for the environment.
No question. You know, there's an environmental cost to that, without question. But it's interesting, Jed, you talk about kind of the environmental element in this book. Writing it made me even more cognizant of how my own childhood search for a field to play ball influenced my later work as an environmental advocate and a longtime proponent for accessible outdoor spaces for all to enjoy. That's the kind of work that I've done my whole life on the environmental side relating to parks. Also, I do a lot of work pertaining to river conservation as well, but all of my work has been kind of environmentally focused. But I look back to my childhood, and in those years I lived in the hills, and there were few places to play ball. Public parks, as I said earlier, were simply too far away for young kids to get to. All of that had a big influence on me. So I think in the book I tried to make the point that accessible outdoor spaces for all, young and old, that they're important. From parks to sport fields, they contribute greatly to our health, our well-being, and they make our communities better places to live.
Yeah. And the life that you and your friends brought to Mr. DeMille's backyard, you probably trampled some roses and trampled down the grass, and there may have been a path that was kind of worn out around those makeshift bases. But it was life, and there was fun, and there was love being had in those fields. And that's so much more beautiful than just this picturesque thing that exists that no one can really touch.
Very good point, Jed. And certainly using those spaces, I think, is so positive. And and that field, Mr. DeMille's yard, literally became the field of our dreams, as kids. And it was, I remember when we first played there, to actually be able to play ball in our own neighborhood, was so exciting. And, I remember hearing the great sounds of the game, the crack of the bat when you got a hit, the ribbing between the kids on both teams, the whack of the ball when it hits your glove, just the sounds of ball, the sounds of kids laughing, that kind of life. So that field that was so little used, all of a sudden it came to life, and it became this neighborhood gathering place. And, the laughter there was incredible. And I think in the end, Mr. DeMille saw value in that.
Yeah. And I really hope that parents and kids sit down, read this book, and talk about it, and maybe we'll see a resurgence of Sandlot baseball, or just kids going out and spontaneously coming together and playing a game and having fun, because we don't see enough of that these days.
Oh, Jed, I agree. And for children that read this, my hope is they'll identify with this young boy, this shy young boy who was very determined, his nervousness that he had to overcome before meeting with Mr. DeMille. But for parents as well, once again, I do hope it casts them back to that time in their lives when they were young and our summers centered around playing with friends, doing things like Sandlot baseball, and hopefully that'll make them smile, and I'd love to think that we'll see more kids today doing that same kind of thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. Mark, where can we go to find out more about you, and can we play baseball, Mr. DeMille, and maybe some of the other work that you're involved in?
Well, if you go to our website, Can We Play Baseball, Mr. DeMille, there's a good summary of the book there. It'll give you an example of a few of the illustrations. There's also a bit of a bio on myself. And, and it'll direct you to some of the other books that I've written and some of the work that I do.
Awesome, awesome. And that's canweplaybaseballmrdemille.com. And you absolutely want to go there. The illustrations that are featured on the page are really fun, and if you were my age, it's just going to bring back so many memories. And even the butler showing you up the door, it reminds me of being shown out many doors without anybody saying, "Bring the young man back in." It was more like, "Call the cops on that kid." We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reading with Your Kids, and will join us for the next exciting episode of the show. We also hope it inspires you to consider writing a review of the show on whatever platform you are listening to the show on. 5-star reviews are awesome, and they really help other people find the podcast. We've been publishing since 2017. We have a mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Even though we have this mission, there's still 40% of 4th graders and 8th graders that are reading way, way, way below expectations. So we want to make a difference, and we want to get families reading. So please consider writing a review. Consider sharing a link to this episode to somebody that you love, somebody that is a parent, somebody that's a grandparent, or just somebody that you think would enjoy it. We'd really appreciate that. We'd also really appreciate if you connect with us on social media. Facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, @readingwithyourkids on Instagram, and @JedleyMagic on X. We have a great YouTube channel, youtube.com/readingwithyourkids. And of course, we'd love for you to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful, starting with our guest, Angie Kang. Please be sure to check out our link. I want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Chris Doherty, Stella Sheree. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today, and as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place. And you do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next episode of Reading with Your Kids.
Thank you.